And I don't think that the... oh, my Roomba just bumped into my foot. Hello everyone, I'm Kevin, otherwise known as Forum BX257, your friendly neighborhood 1980s G.I. Joe reviewer. And today I'll be taking a look at the G.I. Joe Programmed Assault Computer Rapid All-Terrain Weapon Systems, the 1983 Packrat, Flamethrower, Machine Gun, and the Missile Launcher. Now, all three Packrats make their first comic book appearance in the old Marvel comic run of G.I. Joe in issue number 19. And they make their first cartoon appearance in the 1984 5-part miniseries, The Revenge of Cobra, in Part 3. Now, as you can see, as in 1983, and as were released in 1984, they came individually boxed. However, they were only sold as a set of 3 from 1986 to 1993 as a Hasbro mail-away. Interestingly enough, sometime during that long tenure of mail-aways, the green plastic used on the retail versions was actually quite darker. It's speculated that Hasbro integrated foreign overstock into the last bit of the line of Packrat mail-aways, something that Hasbro actually did quite a lot in the late 80s and early 90s. So let's take a look at the Machine Gun Packrat first. This 4-barreled machine gun weapon system has 2 barrels fixed on the bottom part of the body chunk here, as well as 2 barrels on the upper part which can elevate. You can actually put them down flat there for a 4-barreled aggressive machine gun look. The body is connected to the base and can swivel around completely. The base is the same forward or backward, so it doesn't really matter which way it's pointing. The base itself is articulated, so that gives the free-rolling wheels a sort of a tight turning pattern. And finally, you also have an antenna on top here, which can be put down. Of course, I believe the play pattern is that if you put the antenna down, the Packrat was supposed to be off, and if you put it back up, the Packrat was now on. And of course, you have that sort of feature because you also have a remote control meant for the figures. And this is the specific remote control for the Machine Gun Packrat. This bit down here is the handhold, and this part up here was sort of a joystick in the same vein as like an Atari joystick, I suppose. And for those of you who like hunting down variations, on the blueprint side of the machine gun's instruction sheet, it shows in error the missile launcher's remote control. Now, most of these were corrected to the proper machine gun's remote control drawing, but it's something to look out for, especially if you don't want an inaccurate blueprint. Next, let's take a look at the Flamethrower. The Flamethrower is the most articulated of the 3 Packrats, even though its flame nozzle is just directly connected to its body chunk here. But the body can move on the base 360 degrees, has 2 little heat shields which move up and down. The base itself has 3 articulated legs which can go up and down on this hinge. The treads are also articulated. All of them are like that. And in between the front leg are 2 little guns which have a tab at the back. So if you hold that tab and move that around, you can move the guns around too. It's a little difficult with the 3rd leg right in the middle like that though. And then, like the Machine Gun Packrat, it too has an antenna. So you can push that down to simulate the thing being off, and raise it to simulate the Flamethrower being activated or in its on position. And of course, like the all three. We have a tiny little remote control for the action figures to hold on to. And this is more like a radio rather than the other one. It's actually kind of curious that they went with a completely separate design, but this is the handle for the action figure's hand. Has little buttons and a little antenna. Oh, I forgot to mention that there are wheels on the bottom of these fake treads. And they all make that noise. I don't think that was intentional though. And last but not least, we have the missile launcher. The most popular of the unpopular Packrats. The missile system has 4 big missiles attached to the hard points on the turret. The turret hard points actually move up and down in sync, and the turret itself can move on the base 260 degrees. The simulated treads have little wheels underneath there, so it can roll. And that's kind of it. It doesn't really have a lot of the same features that the other Packrats had. But the real star, of course, are the missiles themselves. These are 2-stage rockets. And the thruster engine pops off, and the rest of the rocket is supposed to go supersonic towards its target. Unfortunately, the rockets are kind of the most fragile part of this Packrat. Not only do the fins crack off fairly easily, but this little peg for the back portion cracks off as well. Now, if the missiles look kind of familiar, then you're probably familiar with the 1984 Cobra Stinger. Just taking a look at the box real quick, you can see that they originally used Packrat missiles for this 1984 vehicle as the design basis for what would eventually become the Stinger rockets. Of course, you can see how fairly close that they were. Interesting enough that they put the peg hole for the Stinger rockets so far back, whereas the peg hole for the Packrats are actually quite a bit further. Meaning that if you put this onto a Stinger, it sits quite a bit further back and pretty much in the face of any figure that was standing on the back railing here. Even though the missile launcher didn't have an articulated antenna like the other 2 Packrats to simulate it being on or off, it still came with a remote control. Again, it's surprising that all the remote controls are an individual design. This one looking a bit like a 1980s cell phone. And here are the Packrats with figures, just to give you a sense of scale. I will have to warn you though, the remotes for the Flamethrower and the machine gun have little handles which perfectly fit the figure's hands, but you don't have the same thing for the missile launcher's remote. You kind of have to squeeze it into the hand, and quite frankly, I really don't recommend that for older figures. I just have mine blue-tacked into the palm of this guy's hand. When they were released back in 1983, the Packrats were not exactly popular. As a matter of fact, even today, they're not exactly on the top of any collector's lists. And it's hard to pin down a single reason as to why that is. But one thing is kind of popular among collectors thinking is that these things sort of took away from the individual G.I. Joe figures. Now, remember, G.I. Joe might be Army figures, but they're not all Army infantry. They're an army of specialists. So we have machine gunners, we have flamethrowers, we have missile men, and yet these things almost seem to replace them in a way, which doesn't seem terribly fair. And then there's the fact that they're robots in a military line. Now granted, the G.I. Joes had the most advanced weaponry of their time, but perhaps robots were crossing a sort of science fiction line that they weren't meant to invoke. So these things were almost depicted as autonomous robots in both the cartoon and the comic books. So that kind of gave them a much more, I guess, Star Wars-y kind of a feel to them. Of course, Star Wars Return of the Jedi had come out the same year, so we are looking at something that was probably kind of influenced by that as well. But the Packrats are very practically designed. They're not stylized in any shape, way, or form. Of course, they do have little remote controls, so they're actually quite realistic to what robots are like today. Hasbro was really ahead of its time when they made the Packrats. Well, that's all the time I have right now. Please check out my Facebook page for more information and behind-the-scenes photos for these reviews. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for next time to see another 1980s G.I. Joe toy review. See you then.